So along with the wildlife we want to be there, we are also going to get wildlife that we don't want to be there, such as gophers, voles, and mice and rats. And so in some cases, rodents can be important for the ecosystem, especially if they are burrowing rodents. They can increase soil aeration and soil fertility, but at the cost of damaging vines. Gophers can eat the roots of young vines and kill them. Voles can girdle trunks of pretty mature vines, and we don't want that. So if we can help boost our owl populations, we can help increase predation on these pests that we don't want. Also, some other unwanted activities like the burrows that these rodents make, they can be dangerous to livestock stepping into the holes and breaking their ankles. It can cause roads to be unstable. It can also be dangerous for machinery. So we can only tolerate so much when they are causing this level of damage. And so one way to think about managing pests on a vineyard is to think about an integrated pest management approach. And that's using multiple tools in our toolbox to address a pest problem. And so here are some of our integrated pest management tools, like habitat modification, removing things that are desirable to these species. Sometimes that's keeping the under rows clear of grass so that voles aren't chewing on the stems. We can also do cultural practices, so that would include things like mowing or tilling or sometimes flooding, which is not a typical practice in vineyards. Also biological control, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Those are all pretty effective methods when used in combination to help control rodent pests. Other things that may work for some species and not for others, such as exclusion, trapping, shooting, and no repellents are proven to be effective for any rodents. And so one thing about owls is that they eat a lot of gophers and voles. And so gophers are the ones that live underground, and they burrow through the ground and they make a little gopher mound. So you may not see them, but you may see mounds, or if you have young vines, you may see that their roots have been damaged. Voles, they actually live a little bit closer to the surface of the ground. They're going to be burrowing through grass. They have small burrows in the dirt, but they're mostly running through grass and vegetation. It's very effective for barn owls to be eating these too. However, barn owls do not eat ground squirrels. Ground squirrels are larger and they're out during the day, and they typically take cover in their burrow system at night when barn owls are out. But I will talk a little bit about raptor perches and how you can promote diurnal raptors, so hawks and other things, and they will help with ground squirrels. And again, when we think about biological control using nest boxes, raptor perches, this is not going to be your fix-all solution. It is just one tool in our toolbox that we can utilize in order to have an integrated approach and healthier ecosystem. So if you do have a rodent problem, you will want to think about other strategies to use in tandem, in combination with owl boxes, perches, etc. So we're going to talk more for the rest of the presentation about birds of prey and the biological control that they provide when they eat our rodent pests. And as I said at the beginning, by supporting birds of prey, you're also increasing sustainability and conservation on farms. Barn owls are a farmer's best friend just because they eat so many rodents. One family can eat 3,000 to 4,000 rodents in one nest period. Barn owls typically have 2 nest periods per year, and they can even have up to 3. So that's a lot of rodents. A lot of research has been done, especially here in Napa Valley, showing that barn owls can have an impact on the amount of rodents in a vineyard. For example, in vineyards that had nesting owls, they did have fewer gophers overall. It's also been shown in other cropping systems that the presence of owls can lead to reduced damage from rodents. So these are difficult studies to conduct, but because it's hard to connect the presence of owls with reduction of damage. But out of all of the raptors that we can attract, barn owls have the most research behind them. They're also probably the easiest to attract, especially here in Napa. And these photos are, the top right photo is of inside an active nest box. So you can see the bodies of various gophers, voles, mice, maybe about a dozen or so. And that's because sometimes their eyes are bigger than their stomachs, and they hunt all night, and they cache their prey in their nest boxes. And in this situation, the nestlings were still very young, so they weren't eating at a fast enough rate to consume all that the parents were able to hunt for them. So they're really, really effective predators, and they hunt in complete pitch black using their facial discs, so their feathers are arranged in a way that the sounds of rodents are funneled to their ears, and they can hear where the rodents are in pitch black. So that's one thing really cool about barn owls. American kestrels are another raptor. They're a small falcon, about 8 inches high or so, and they have less research behind them, but their presence is associated with less damage in orchards. There was a study in cherry orchards showing that kestrels chased away the songbirds that ate the fruit. Unfortunately for vineyards, I think that the timing is a little bit late with fruit ripening and birds that like to eat grapes for that to be super effective, but kestrels also eat gophers, voles, mice, and can help in that sense as well. So less research has been done on these guys, but it is another species that we have that we can help attract. And kestrels are going to be using this mid-size box here. So they're a lot smaller, and they have different properties of the box. This one here is a barn owl box, so it's a lot larger. Another species that we have here that will use this kestrel-sized box is western screech owl. They're an owl. They're maybe 6 to 8 inches high. They look like a miniature great horned owl. If anyone's seen the larger great horned owls, they're not babies. They're their own species. And we don't know much about their ability to control pest rodents, but we do know that they are eating a lot of rodents. So in these two photos, this one on the left is actually here in Napa on a vineyard. She's sitting on her eggs, and she has about 6 or 7 mice kind of like in a circle around her. And then the photo on the right, we were very surprised to find that the screech owl had carried in a full-size gopher into its nest, which is probably weighs more than the owl. So that was very surprising. There are slightly different considerations when installing nests for screech owls, kestrels, and barn owls. I tried to show a photo of kind of how that should look. Western screech owls are going to be found in this medium-sized nest box closer to riparian areas or forest edges. So you can effectively place these on trees in those areas or on poles nearby. But we do find that kestrels prefer to be more out in the open. So we recommend kestrel nest boxes out on poles so that they can effectively look for predators and defend their nest box that way. There is some, kestrels nesting near trees and some screech owls nesting in the open, but in general, they follow this pattern. Barn owls also like to be more out in the open. So because vineyards have those rows and they also have a lot of grass and cover underneath the rows, it makes an ideal area for barn owls to hunt throughout the vineyard. So vineyards are really suitable habitat for barn owls. Also, they like open grassland areas, oak savanna areas. But once you get into areas with thick, dense forests, you won't find barn owls nesting there. It'll be less common to find barn owls nesting in areas where the forest is very thick. So think about open areas and grasslands and vineyards for placing owl nest boxes. Some other considerations for nest box installation. The timing, you would do best to get your nest boxes installed by late summer or early fall. These birds start to pair up and pick their nest boxes as early as winter. So they're hanging out there before spring comes, before breeding starts. And so the earlier you get your nest boxes up, the more likely they have time to find them before breeding. And they're also not going to be occupied immediately. Sometimes you can get lucky and they will take up a nest box right away. Other times it can take 2 or 3 years or more. It really depends on the local population of birds, the amount of prey on your farm, and other factors like weather or other things that could influence whether or not owls are finding the boxes. So if you don't get birds right away, don't be discouraged. You just need to be patient. If after 3 years you aren't finding any use of the boxes, you can move them to different locations or you can keep waiting. Sometimes they will still show up. And let's see. Other things that you want to avoid would be roads. Raptors and barn owls in particularly can be susceptible to getting killed by a vehicle collision. With the vehicle collisions, they're looking down, they're hunting, they're not paying attention to the road. So it's very common, and we can't prevent the owls from crossing roads or flying near roads, but we can move the nest boxes away from the roads so that they're spending a little bit less time near the roads. Farm roads are typically fine because these are dirt roads that are just traveled every once in a while throughout the day and don't cause problems. But I'm thinking like highways or county roads or busy paved roads you'd want to avoid. You also want to think about creating a network. If you put up one box, it's less likely for owls to find that box because more owls attract more owls. So if you have several boxes, you're going to increase the likelihood of getting your box found and occupied. There's no number I can give you to say, put out X number of boxes on X number of acres. It's more about starting with a manageable number of boxes, monitoring to see if owls are using those boxes, and once you have owls regularly in your boxes, then you can start to add more. And this helps to build a population in your area and promote stability, and that the families will stay and that their offspring will stay and nest year after year. So this is a picture of one farm in Yolo County, which is generally outlined by that box. They had 50 barn owl boxes, and we were able to place tiny trackers on 7 owls. And the owls that we tracked are marked by this flag, where their nest boxes is marked by this flag. And their tracks where they were hunting are all the different colors. So each color is a different owl's flight path. So you could see that when you put up barn owl boxes on your property, they're not just staying there. They're also hunting on your neighbor's property and other farms and areas in around that. They can go up to 4 miles away from their nest box. So another strategy and approach is to talk to other farmers nearby. If you're putting up a barn owl box or 2, have your neighbors put up a couple barn owl boxes as well to promote that regional population. A great way to tell if your nest boxes are being used without looking inside is to look around, looking around this opening right here. Barn owls will leave kind of a scuff mark right here, and so you can see if they've been going in and out a lot. You'll see some markings here. So next we'll talk about building barn owl nest boxes and the plans that you have at your table. So one option is to buy barn owl nest boxes, and there's a wildlife rescue in Napa that has a barn owl box program. So if building boxes and installing them is not an option, you can contact them and they will come out and they will help figure out where to put nest boxes, help install them, and they can sell you the boxes as well. So I just wanted to promote that as one option. But we also have these great plans that you can follow in order to build your own nest boxes. And so we'll go through some of the different features of the nest box. And then after that, I have a few slides to talk about raptor perches as well. So the materials you'll need to build a barn owl nest box, you'll need a 1.5 inch sheet of untreated plywood, wood glue, 2 hinges, and a latch for the cleaning door. You'll also need 24 inches of 1/2 inch PVC, and that's to go here to help with the risers of the shade panels. The bolts that go through here as well are they're 1/2 by 4 inch hex bolts with a flat bottom, not pointy, because it is in the inside of the box, so you don't want that to be sharp. And then also you'll need about 50 1.25 inch wood screws and painting supplies. So we laid out the cutting order on this rectangle to mimic a sheet of plywood. And one thing that I'd like to point out is that we recommend to cut from the bottom left because the saw blade will take away 1/8 of an inch. So if you start on the right side, it's more important that the front and back and left side and right side of the box are exact, whereas the heat shields or the shade panels, they don't need to be exact. So if you are taking off 1 inch from that, it doesn't matter. But the boxes need to be exact to fit together. So for the construction, so the first piece is the top, and that would be this piece in here, not this. This is the heat shield. So the top is not going to have anything in it until you attach the heat shields. The front is going to have a 5-inch circle, and that's for the opening. And we want this to be about 5 inches to prevent larger birds like ravens or great horned owls from entering. We also don't recommend a perch on the front because the barn owls will just perch on the hole and then pop in the box that way. If you have a perch on the front, it can promote ravens or other owls from, it can promote them to depredate or kill the young owls inside the box. So it gives them kind of access to the box that we don't want. The back is the same size as the front and also doesn't have any other holes in that. So the left side and the right side, they're gonna have these ventilation holes. So you could see here, there's 3, you can do 3 or 4, it just depends. And this is to help with airflow. So inside the box is pretty gross because like you saw, all those rodents in there that are dead and decaying. There's a lot of barn owl pellets and poop, and it all builds up. So it's very smelly. So it's very nice if they have ventilation. It's healthier for the owls. And also helps with temperature regulation. If it's very hot, those ventilation holes can allow air circulation. And then on the right side, you have, and this will be hard to see if you're on that side, but there's a cleaning hatch. So this opens this way, and this is important for annual cleaning and maintenance. So we'll talk about that after, but having a way to scrape out the insides is pretty handy if you have to clean out the boxes. And we found we like the side opening the best. One thing, so this will have 2 hinges and a latch, and we recommend something pretty secure because if this we commonly find this deteriorates and breaks off, and it will effectively, it could kill owls that nest in there if this breaks off while they're nesting. Another common thing we find is that the latch breaks and then this is like open in the wind. That can also be very dangerous. So having very secure galvanized hardware is expensive, but it's definitely worth it for the safety of the birds and the longevity of your boxes. Let's see, the partition. So inside, you can see kind of on the, let's see, on the diagram on the slides, but also just inside here is the partition. And that partition, it blocks sunlight from the owls that are nesting over here, kind of, they'll be over here kind of on this side nesting, and that also protects them from predators like a raccoon reaching in or something else sticking their head in that hole. So it's just added protection. It's also debated of whether or not this is needed. So if you can't put the partition for some reason, it's probably fine. It's just an added security measure. And then we have the top heat shield, and then there's also one in the back. And so that's gonna help with reducing the temperature in the box because it prevents direct sunlight from hitting the boxes. It provides a little bit of shade and airflow. The best way to have lower temperatures in the box is to paint it a light color, have these heat shields or shade panels, whatever you would like to call them, and then also face the box to the east or north. And that way, when the sun rises and sets in the southern sky, the shade is on the box all day. Let's see. Some other important security features for safety for the nestlings inside is having this opening close to the top of the box. That's because nestlings, when the parents come to feed, they're gonna perch right here and drop food in. And once the nestlings are old enough, they're gonna be all fighting right here. And it's really easy for a sibling to like shove another sibling like outside of the box. And once they're down on the ground, they can't get back in the box, and usually the parents will ignore them. So we wanna have the nestlings down at a level where they can't push each other out until they're really able to fly. And that takes about 2 months for barn owls. So once their eggs, they hatch, their mother stays in the box for 2 weeks with them, and the father does solely all of the hunting. Then the mom in the box, she's feeding them, and then after 2 weeks, she participates in hunting because they need more food, so she has to go out and also help hunt. At that time, they can also feed themselves, and then they just drop the food in the box, and having them at that lower level is really important. It also helps because barn owl pellets build up, so you can start out in the bottom with a low level at the beginning of the year, and after one nest cycle, it can be, up 6 or 7 inches of pellets and rodent remains and things like that. And so as that builds up over time, we're shrinking the amount of space the owls have. So that's why cleaning comes in and is really important. The other thing, what's the second thing? Oh, yes, and we already talked about facing north or east, the importance of the ventilation holes and the shade panels or heat shields. There's a couple other recommendations on the plans, so under recommendations, when you're putting the boxes together, you want to start with the front, with the left side, and the back. And once you have those together, then you can add the bottom and the partition. And from there, you will add the top right piece. You do not want to add this door until after it's painted, because it'll get painted closed. The other thing, and I'm not a carpenter, maybe you have more experience than me doing this, but the way that these were put together is by using wood glue and then tacking, just temporarily using small nails to hold the box in place, and then using a drill to drill pilot holes, and then putting the screws in those drilled pilot holes. So there's wood glue, tacking, and then drilling and screwing. Furring strips, which are to increase the rigidity and the strength of the box. So there is a little bit of extra wood that's unused from the plywood, and so you can take those and you can put those around the edge of the inside to help the stability of the box. And also for painting, you only need to paint the outside. It's not recommended to paint the inside. So up next is cleaning and maintenance. But actually before I talk about that, I want to add, once you have the box to this point, you should add a layer of wood shavings, like wood chips, because owls do not build their nests, and neither do kestrels. So it's really important that they have a layer of wood chips, because if you can imagine putting eggs on a table surface, then they're just going to roll around. But they need to stay together in a cup so that the mom can incubate them and they can hatch properly. So if there are wood chips, then that keeps the eggs in place for incubation. Once they take up a nest and you have a lot of pellets, and I was talking about how that can build up over time, you will want to look inside the boxes every year to see if it has been used and to see if those pellets have been built up. And if it's unused, you don't need to do anything. If it's just a low amount of pellets, you don't need to do anything. But if it is built up, you will want to remove some of those pellets and debris in order to lower the amount of substrate that's left in the box. And when you do this, we recommend to wear a mask because it includes a lot of rodent fur, which can be dusty and it's uncomfortable and not safe to breathe. The best time to do this is in late summer and early fall. And that's because this is when the owls are least likely to be initiating nests. During the nest initiation phase, this is the most sensitive period where owls can be disturbed and discouraged from nesting in that box. So once it becomes December, about now, like after Thanksgiving time, once it becomes December, I wouldn't recommend looking in the owl boxes after that. This can be difficult because harvest goes up through late summer and fall, but it's great to have it in your mind that as soon as harvest is over, check the owl boxes. Then you can get to them before it gets too late. But if you do see a nest box that is empty and in need of repair, you should still address it. Once these are out in the elements all day, all year, and they can deteriorate, so it's important that we make sure that they're sound and sturdy and that all of the hardware is closed and in good shape. You don't need to put wood chips every year. You can just remove some of the owl pellets and leave some owl pellets if you are cleaning out those boxes. That can also save you a lot of time in terms of cleaning out boxes. I also recommend that keeping a record, so if you have a map with all your barn owl box locations, you can number them, and then you can write down which ones had evidence of nesting, which ones were cleaned out, and then that can help you. Because sometimes these don't need to be cleaned out for up to 2 years, so you can save time by keeping a log, and you think you'll remember what you did last year, but I can't. I always think I will remember, but I never do. So writing it down can be helpful. Okay, so lastly, I want to just have...
Maybe would we be able to do some quick questions in case they have questions about the owl boxes?
Yeah, I have 2 slides on perches. So should I go through that first and then have questions?
No, if it's only 2 more, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the last thing, perches are much easier than barn owl boxes. It's just a pole with a crossbeam, and it can be made out of a variety of materials, even scrap materials. And if it deteriorates and falls down, you're not risking the health of any birds because they're not sleeping in it or nesting in it, So these can be cheaper and easier to do. There's just a couple recommendations. One is to have a wooden crossbar where the feet are. This should be wooden, and that's so that it doesn't burn their feet. With metal, it can be more unnatural. It can also get hot. We also have done a couple studies looking at the height, and we think 15 feet high is optimal. Sometimes they can be shorter, 10 feet, even up to 20 feet, but the higher you go, the more expensive. So 15 feet seems to be a good, happy medium. You can put them in the ground with concrete, which is maybe a little bit more expensive, but you can also attach them to vineyard trellising or fence posts. But beware of if you have overhead machinery, that can get in the way. It might preclude you from putting this inside the vineyard. Where to put the perches? you're going to want to place these in the highest locations on the vineyard. So you would like to put them on the hilltops, or if you have like a ridge line. That way, raptors, they can see for 1 mile. So you think they can't see way down to the bottom of the hill, but I can't even comprehend how they can see that far, but they have really amazing eyesight. And we have found that placing them in the areas that have the best view will increase their use. So you can also place them throughout fields, but again, if you have overhead machinery, that could be problematic to have them within the vineyards. And here's just a couple of photos. You always want the perches to be the tallest thing around. So if you do have trees or other things nearby, then put your perches somewhere else where they will be the tallest thing in the area. This is an olive orchard, so these perches were sticking out above the mature trees, and that seemed pretty effective. This is just an example of a perch at the top of a hill and outside of the vineyard. And I think now would be a great time to take any questions that you have about birds on farms or building nest boxes or placing nest boxes. I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, en este momento cualquier pregunta que tengan sobre las cajas de los búhos, de cualquier... a ver, si tienen preguntas, pues.
Any questions?
Oh, todos ya son expertos.
How many people have seen owl boxes out on the vineyards? Nice. Yeah, they're very common, and I think a great feature. So if you have, you can always email me or pass along my email address. I'm happy to answer questions about getting out barn owl nest boxes or other wildlife and vineyard related topics. So with that, I'll thank everybody. Thank you.
Okay. So one question would be, where is the best place to put the owl box? If it's better like along the edge of the vineyard, further out, like where would be a good place?
So in terms of where to place owl boxes on a vineyard, you can put them anywhere that makes sense for your farming operation. So they can be inside the vineyard itself, except if you have overhead machinery, that could be problematic. So I recommend kind of how placing them kind of like along the edges around the vineyard, and that way it's out of the way of machinery, and it doesn't get in the way of operations. If everything is done by hand in a vineyard, they can be inside the vineyard rows, next, like by the trellis and stuff. You do want to avoid putting it near the edge if it's like a riparian area or if there's a lot of trees, because that can deter the owls. So open areas in and around the vineyard. Does that answer your question? It's flexible.
¿Otra pregunta?
NAPA tiene un programa para las cajas. ¿Eso significa que apoyan con las cajas o qué significa?
So the question is about the program that you mentioned, the Napa, con la asociación de Napa Wildlife, or? Yeah, the Napa Wildlife program about the boxes, does that mean that they help financially with the boxes, or what does that entail?
So the Napa Wildlife Rescue Barn Owl Box Program is a nonprofit organization, and they do charge for their services. They provide really good quality, high quality boxes, and all of the proceeds go to the wildlife rescue to feed the animals. So they don't have any financial programs, but there is the RCD and NRCS sometimes have matching programs. I don't have any information about that now, but if I do, maybe I can pass it along to your organization to send out.
So the Napa Wildlife Program, they offer the complete boxes already for purchase? Correct.
Yeah.
Otra pregunta?
Ground, what do you do, or who do you call, or how do you help that animal?
Yeah, so the question was, if you find a barn owl on the ground out during the day, what do you do? And Napa Wildlife Rescue is the only wildlife rehab that operates in Napa County. So that would be the first step. They have a hawk line that you can find easily if you Google Napa Wildlife Rescue. Someone will answer and they can give you advice on what to do. If you see an owl, let's see, let me go back. See if I can get to. Almost there, sorry. Okay, if you see an owl like this, that's fluffy, kind of like a duckling, like fluff, not feathers, that's too young to be out of the box. So in that case, you would likely rescue the owl and bring it to the rehab, or they can come out and get it. They do fly out of the box as newly fledged young after 2 months. They're very clumsy and also sometimes on the ground. They look like they can't fly, but they would be fully feathered and they would look like an adult owl. So if you do see an owl on the ground that has a lot of feathers and it's spring or summer, you could probably assume that that's just a young owl. You can still call, but it's likely they'll tell you to leave it because that night it's gonna fly back up to the box and it'll get fed. If they can't fly, like if they're just fluffy, then they're gonna be very exposed and vulnerable. And then in that case, sometimes the rescue will put the owls back in the box. They'll check if it's near a box and there's a family. Sometimes the families have moved on and they can foster it into a different owl box, or they can raise it and release it at the rehab. So I would just recommend starting with the rescue. Yeah, good question. And I did want to cover that, so I'm really glad you asked it.
Como en invierno aprenden las wind machine y en ese tiempo no están activos los búhos trabajando comiendo.
So the question is, like in wintertime at the beginning of the year, when it's frost season and we're turning on the wind machines in the vineyards, does that impact the owls or birds at all?
That's also a really good question. So the question was about the wind machines and if it impacts the owls selecting the nest boxes. We don't know. There is some research on whether owls are deterred from that noise. And so far, the research has looked at tractor noise and not wind turbine or the wind machine noise. So actually, the owls are attracted to tractor noise because they think that all the rodents are getting kicked up and they can get an easy meal. How they react to the wind turbine, the wind machine noise, we're not sure. We still see a lot of owls nesting on farms that have the wind machines. So at this point, maybe keeping it a little bit away from the wind machine, maybe not right at it, is important. But I don't have any definitive information about it. But it's a really good question.
So the question is, for the barn owls, how many babies can they have in a year?
How many babies can the barn owls have? A lot. They can, in some places, lay up to 12 eggs. We see here commonly 8 eggs. And we commonly see 4 to 8 young, an average 6 young for every nest. And that can vary based on the year. In rainy springs, barn owls can't hunt as well. So if it's if it's rainy in April, May, then there's usually fewer babies because they can't hunt as efficiently and as much prey. So they may lay 8 eggs, but only 2 or 3 survive. We have seen up to 9, 10 babies fledge. It's really incredible. And one thing that can promote more babies surviving is having these larger style boxes. So some styles are smaller and there's less room for the owls while they're developing, and that can cause some of the owls to die while they're still in the nest. So having larger boxes helps, and then everything else is a little bit out of our control in terms of weather and how well the owls can hunt that year. But yeah, so it's common that they start nesting, picking their nest boxes in December, January. February and March, they'll start laying their eggs. Then they will sit on those eggs for 30 days, and then they will have to grow for 60 days before they fledge the nest. So that's 3 months, and that goes from March, April, May, June. In June, some owls that started early will lay more eggs. And what's really common is that the female will ditch the family and she'll go find another mate and start another nest box. So she's probably having anywhere from, one nest, 3 to 6 babies, all the way up to 12 to 15 babies, just depending on how many survive. So a lot. Does that answer your question? You're welcome.
¿Otra pregunta? Si no hay más preguntas ahorita, entonces, maybe if you want to put the contact info up again, que pueden anotar el contacto de Brianna y cualquier pregunta también pueden enviar a la fundación y podemos agarrar la información. Entonces, sí podemos dar las gracias pues a Brianna por su tiempo.